It's time for the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel Podcast.
We've got lots and lots of things to talk about and to do today.
Covering the territories from the 1940s to the 1990s.
It's the best thing going today.
Interviewing wrestlers, referees, authors, and other media personalities that have made the sport of professional wrestling great.
The cream, yeah. The cream of the crop.
And now, here's your host, Tony Richards.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel History Podcast. I'm Tony Richards. And of course, we call this podcast, this particular one, because I'm going to have other podcasts coming up down the road that I have in the works and in the plans. This particular podcast is known as Personalities, Territories, Towns, and Buildings. And in this podcast, we flash back 50 years to 1975, tracking and documenting the history of pro wrestling through the entire year of 1975 and all the various pro wrestling territories during that year. And we talk about the personalities. We talk about the territory, the towns that were involved, and the historic buildings where these shows occurred, a lot of them every single week. And so another thing I wanted to do before we get to today's show is I want to give you my heartfelt thanks, because so many of you have reached out and told me how much you've enjoyed the 4-part series I did with my good friends Jerry Briscoe and John Bradshaw on the life and legacy of Jim Barnett. And it means a lot to me that I've met so many new friends that I've met through social media or that have reached out by email, or just all different kinds of ways to tell me how much they really love the show. A lot of comments on X, the platform X, formerly known as Twitter. And so thank you all so much. I mean, it really does mean a lot. A lot of hard work and diligence goes in to doing these kinds of shows, and it's nice to see your work pay off with people's appreciation. So thank you so much for that. And if you liked that, you may not be aware that I did a show last year on Dory Funk Sr. for Jerry and John on Stories with Briscoe and Bradshaw, and that show is almost 3 hours long. And so if we did that show over again, it would probably be 3 and 4 parts. And maybe we'll do that sometime down the road. I know Jerry and John want to do more shows like we just did. It's difficult for me to allocate my time, which is another thing I wanted to talk to you about today before we get into the program, are the projects I'm working on. So when you come to Substack is the program, or the platform rather, that I'm using to document and publish all my pro history research. And the reason I chose Substack is because they have so many multimedia ways to do it, through publishing written articles, through audio, through video. They also give you the opportunity to go live. That's something I'd like to do down the road, is to do some live stuff with people who want to talk about this era, these golden days of pro wrestling history, and do kind of a show around that with live interaction with listeners and viewers. And so that's the reason I chose Substack. So if you come to Substack and you search for Tony Richards 4, the number 4, you'll find me, and you'll find the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. And there you have your choice of 2 different subscriptions. You can do a free subscription, and if you do that, you'll get the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel Daily Chronicle. And in the Daily Chronicle, I write a newsletter every single day that's pretty much revolves around that day in history, with birthdays and with RIP salutes for the wrestlers who have been in the business but have passed on. I want to make sure we remember all of them for their contribution and their lives that they have given to this business. Also, I do flashbacks, and so I write about particular interesting and influential events that happened 80 years ago, 70 years ago, 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 40 years ago in 1985, that were fundamentally changing the wrestling business into what it would eventually morph and evolve into. And make no mistake about it, the wrestling business is always changing. So I have a whole lot to write about. So you get the Daily Chronicle every single day in an email. You also get an email with this show. territories, towns, personalities, and buildings, and it'll come to you every time we release a new podcast. That's if you do a free subscription at Substack. If you want to invest $5 a month and save $10 a year and invest $50, then you get access to some special projects I'm working on. And these are the things I just want to mention and tell you about. You'll get something that I'm calling the mailbox update. I used to do it in the Facebook group a lot where I'd go to my mailbox and I'm always finding interesting things that people have sent to me or things that I've acquired for my collection. That's going to be a series that I'm going to be doing in the paid section of my Substack Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel channel, where I'll go through things that I've acquired, which, speaking of, I'm so proud of this. And I wanted to show you on the show today something I got. When I went to the St. Louis Wrestling Hall of Fame in May that Herb Simmons put on, I got a chance to visit with Dory Funk Jr. and Marty Funk. And we were there visiting, and they had with them the NWA. This is not the original title belt, but the NWA Crown Jewel belt, which I got from them while I was sitting there. And I got Dory Funk Jr. to autograph it right here, right below this main NWA title plate right there. And so some of you know, some of you don't know, I'm relocating. I'm moving. I've lived in Columbia, Missouri for the last 35 years or so. 25 years, the last 25 years or so. And I'm moving back to my home state of Kentucky, and I've been remodeling a house there. And part of the remodel, I've remodeled a room that's going to be my den, my office where I do my coaching practice, and it'll also be where I do my writing and my pro wrestling history research and everything. So I'm already thinking about how I want that room configured and what I want in there. And I'm going to have a nice trophy case in there right by my new fireplace I'm having put in. And this is going to have a very prominent place there. And I promised Dory and Marty I'd send them a photo when I got this all put together and got it in the case, trophy case and everything. But this is just wonderful. I love this title belt. This was carried by Thez and Rogers and Kaniski and Dory Funk Jr., and it was retired after Harley Race lost to Jack Briscoe. Briscoe got the new 10 pounds of gold belt. But this is a iconic NWA World Championship belt, and I'm so glad to have it in my collection. But I'll be doing videos about things like that I've gotten in the paid section of my Substack. It's $5 a month. You blow that all the time, right? And if you want to save $10, it's $50 a year. Also, I'm going to be doing, and there's plenty of people that'll be super excited about this, I'm going to be doing a docu-series. Some of it will be written, some of it will be on video, but I'm going to do a series on the history of West Texas wrestling, going all the way back to the 1800s. And it'll be a mini series, very much like the Jim Barnett thing that I did with Briscoe and Bradshaw, except it'll have a lot more than 4 parts, and it'll be an ongoing thing, and it'll be published in the paid section of the Substack of the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. So if you'd like to have access on that, and I'm just in the process now, it's not up yet, it's not available yet, but I'm just starting the research. And a lot of it is because the book I'm writing about the life and times of Dory Funk Sr., all the research I have cannot go in a book. I mean, it won't all fit in there. The editors and the publishers won't let me publish every single detail. So I was thinking, like, I would like to have this accessible for people. How do I do that? I'm like, well, I have my own platform, the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. Why don't I publish all that research for everybody to be able to access there? And so I'm going to do that. The history of West Texas wrestling. We're going to have that. We're also going to have a month-by-month documentation of the NWA World Heavyweight title. Right now, I'm working on 1955. So we'll go back 70 years to 55 when Lou Thez had the title. And there's a lot of great stuff that happened in 1955. So I'm working on that piece to publish for paid subscribers. And then also I have a couple of part series on the history of the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Championship. And I'm hoping that that is going to come out this weekend for paid subscribers of my Substack. So a lot of great things, a lot of research going on. I have a lot of things to keep me busy on my list, and you can find it all at my Substack channel, substack.com, and you search for Tony Richards 4 and the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. Okay, let's get to today's show. This show is called Personalities, Territories, Towns, and Buildings. And we're going to start off with a personality profile today of the great Ed Don George. And my special guest is my dear friend Dan Murphy, who's just come out with this book on the life of Ed Don George. And this is a great conversation with Dan. So I hope you enjoy it. I'll be back after this conversation to introduce my second guest today, the great Japanese wrestling historian Fumi Saito, as we talk about Japan in 1975. Here's me and Dan talking about Ed Don George. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel podcast. This is your host, Tony Richards. We've got two shows here on our podcast. One is called Territories, Towns, and Buildings, where we talk about the old territories, we talk about the legendary towns and the historic buildings where pro wrestling took place. And the other one is called Author Spotlight, and that's what we're talking to do today, where we have historians and authors who've written books about the history of professional wrestling. And one of our distinguished authors is here today, Dan Murphy. He's written about 3 or 4 books now. I'll ask him for sure. We talked about The Sisterhood of the Squared Circle with Pat LaPrade, which I love that book about all the different females who have been in professional wrestling. And then a book that I dearly, dearly love that was recommended to me by a dear friend, Jack Lord, called The Wrestler's Wrestler. And that's if you don't have either one of those books, they are fantastic because they profile a lot of different people. But today we're here to talk about Dan's latest book, which is on the life and career of one of the greats, Ed Don George. Welcome, Dan.
Tony, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very excited about the new Ed Don George book.
All right, man. That sounds good. Tell me about the first 2 books, though. Let's talk about Sisterhood of the Squared Circle. So you wrote that with Pat, and I was just telling you before we went on the air here that the first female I ever saw in professional wrestling, I saw her live, and it was Mae Weston, who was Ma Bass and the Bass Boys, and they were heels in Western Kentucky in a outlaw promotion that Phil Golden had, and that was the first live event I'd ever been to. I'd seen Gulas Welch wrestling on television, but I'd never been to a wrestling show, and they had one for my elementary school for a fundraiser to buy uniforms or something like that. and Mae Weston was there, and man, I'm telling you what, she captivated my attention. So what caused you to write the book about the female wrestlers?
Yeah, so years back, maybe around 2014 or so, I was writing for Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I had started up with them around 1997, 98, kind of right out of college. Fell into an opportunity with them and had been reading PWI since I was a kid. So I loved it, got an opportunity to write for a magazine that I grew up reading. And I kind of evolved into the role a little bit more, and they had me travel quite a bit to cover some shows. So I would go out to Chicago for Shimmer, and Shimmer was a independent women's wrestling promotion based in Berwyn, Illinois. And they were bringing in women from around the world. A bunch of the Japanese girls, Asuka, at the time was Kana, was over there, and Paige was in from England, and several others that came through there. It was really getting the reputation as like the best international independent women's showcase in the world. And the women were really, before WWE got on board and everything else, they were giving these women 12, 15, 20, 25 minutes to go out there and really compete and put on a show. So I was going out and attending those shows, and I managed to get PWI to, we had the PWI 500, which is a ranking of the top male wrestlers. We came up with a female 50, and then it became the women's 100, and I understand now they've increased it to, I think, 200, but a ranking for the women. And at first there was a little bit of consideration, are there really 50 women worthy of inclusion? And with something like Shimmer, it became apparent, obviously, yeah, there are. So I was there covering it for the magazine. Pat LaPrade was there as well. He was friends with one of the other promoters and with Bertrand Hebert. And Pat and I, the same circles, we're both wrestling writers. We were talking, and he said, what do you think about a book about women's wrestling? You know, he had done some books with Bertrand,
Hmm.
um, and he knew that I had a background in women's wrestling and covered it for PWI. And I kind of stepped away from him for a minute, and I always carry a notebook with me. In fact, I've got it right next to me here. I always have it. I started writing chapters. What would we include? Does this idea have legs? And it did. So I went back to him and said, I think a book on the history of women's wrestling is timely. Like this could be the time to do it.
Wow.
And we pitched it to ECW Press, and they ran with it, and it took off.
That's great. And for those of you who are watching or listening and you're trying to put two and two together, Pat LaPrade and Bertrand Ebert, they're the guys that wrote the Andre the Giant book. And
They did.
so, yeah, and so a fantastic piece of material. And then you, the Wrestler's Wrestler, which I love. And part of the reason is I'm researching along here a couple of years back and thinking about writing a Dory Funk Senior book, and which I'm doing now. But a couple of guys that were really key in Amarillo, uh, Sputnik Monroe,
Mhm.
Pat O'Connor, Dick Hutton, Gene Kaniski, and I'm like, these dudes are all in this book, you know. And so I was really, really enjoying it because I was thinking about researching those dudes, and you'd done a great, fantastic job in there. So that was written with Brian Young. What was how did you come up with that?
It was. I had the idea of doing a book about the wrestlers. Really the masters of the craft, and it was tough for me to put into words because I talked to a few associates. I talked to Pat LaPrade about it. Hey, what do you think? He's like, there's already been books about shooters. I'm not talking about shooters per se. I'm talking about people who just do it very well. They're in a separate league, and he didn't quite follow it. I spoke to Greg Oliver, another great writer and friend of
Hmm.
mine.
Mine
He
too.
didn't quite follow it. Um, I mean, they did, but they didn't quite see the potential in it that I did. And then I
Well,
spoke
hey,
to
listen, that's okay. I've run a lot of ideas by Greg he hasn't seen the potential in, so that's okay.
Greg can be a tough nut to crack. Yeah.
I love him. I'm just joking.
Um, and then Brian Young is somebody I had known for years. He lives here in the Buffalo area near me. And he was a boxing guy. He loves boxing, and he had been kind of a lapsed wrestling fan. But he was fascinated by all these stories I tell him from going to the Cauliflower Alley Club and getting to know a lot of the veteran wrestlers and their old stories.
Hmm.
And he said, you really ought to do a book where you just talk to all these older guys and record the stories before they're gone. I said, well, Greg's doing that, and there are books like that. But I mentioned this idea of the wrestlers, and his eyes opened up, his ears perked up, and we started kind of spitballing it. And I said, I know you're a historian, not really a writer, but would you be interested in doing this with me? And he jumped at it, and he embraced it all together. Became incredibly passionate about the project, and we spent a few years. ECW Press jumped on, and we basically the idea was we would interview as many wrestlers as we could and ask them who they looked up to the most. If you were to take a student and train them and say, "Here's the tape of somebody I want you to watch," and pick out the nuances, who would be the people? And that's how we kind of chose who would be included is by talking to the wrestlers themselves and finding out who they would include.
Yeah,
And then we try to include the stories and the little nuances. So it's a
I,
little
I love it.
inside wrestling look.
Yeah, are you happy with from your original idea the way the book turned out? Are you glad the way it happened and came about? Is
I
that kind of what you thought it would be, or?
it evolved a little bit more. Brian got a little bit more storytelling in there, a little bit of background and things like that, which I think was good because I think maybe what I was looking to do was a little bit too inside,
Mhm.
all of the techniques and everything. And I think he counterbalanced it well. So I'm very happy with the way it turned out.
Oh,
Yep.
good. That's fantastic. Yeah, Jack was on a podcast or something one night, and he was on there talking about, and they all from time to time they talk about good books they read, and he talked about it. I thought, okay, I'm going to get this book and I'm going to read it. I open it up, I get it, and I open it up, and the first thing that pops out at me is something that says the founding fathers. And then I go, oh, okay, well, this sounds interesting. And I start reading about Ed Strangler Lewis, and I'm like, I can't put this book down. Like, and then we go, Whipper Billy Watson comes up, and then Gene Kaniski. I'm like, I got to go to bed, but I don't want to go to bed. I want to keep reading this. So
That's terrific. That's great.
yeah, great job. And you guys, listen, you need to get that book. You need to get both of those books. All right, let's talk about this legendary figure, Ed Don George, that listen, if you're watching the show today, you might not have ever heard of this guy, but take it from me and take it from Dan. This guy, Ed Don George, there you go. Ed Don George, he is somebody that you're going to be interested in. So let's talk about Ed Don. So where's Ed Don come from?
So Ed Don George was he was born in North Java, New York, outside of Buffalo, where I live, probably about 40 minutes away out in the country. Um, he was a I'd heard the name a lot. I had done a book previously, a very short book on the history of pro wrestling in Buffalo, called Body Slams in Buffalo. I had done some regional books, not wrestling related, history books and things, and they had done well. The publisher asked if I had any other projects I'd want to do, and I wanted to write a little thing about Buffalo's wrestling scene. So it was only about 100-page little book, but it did very well. But Ed Don was this figure that I discovered during that, but I never got into. And then several years ago, maybe 6, 7 years ago, I decided, I want to research this guy a little bit more. I knew he'd been an Olympian. I knew he'd been a world champion in the 1930s. But then I just found this incredibly fascinating life. And it went from being a potential article to a book. I had to do the book. And I could continue to write a second book potentially, because I'm always finding out more and more about Ed Don George and his impact in wrestling and his life. But basically, he was in the 1928 Olympics as a heavyweight, competed, did not win gold in a very controversial call. A lot of that in the book about exactly what happened.
Sure.
He was recruited to become a pro wrestler, and by the end of 1929, he won his first world championship.
Wow.
And he went on to hold 3 recognized world titles in the 1930s. Got out of wrestling right when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, joined the Navy, helped write the hand-to-hand combat guide for naval cadets at Chapel Hill, and then after World War II became a successful wrestling promoter.
Now, where
So
did
he
he?
had this incredible life in the 20th century.
Yeah. So where did he go to school?
He had went to the University of Michigan. He took a little bit of time to go to St. Bonaventure and then back to Michigan again.
I see. So he went 2 different places.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
He took 1 year at Bonaventure in outside of Buffalo near him, and then back to Michigan.
And which one of the many and wide and varied world titles did he hold?
It was the Paul Bowser. I have 2 little things. I always want to say Paul Bosch instead of Paul Bowser. I
Of
always
course.
worry about that. And then the other one, I was doing a podcast recently, and whenever I say Jim Londos, I have to stop myself from saying Tolos.
It's a recency bias kicking
exactly.
in.
Yeah. So anyway, but I'm sorry. What was your question?
Yeah, so it was the AWA title then.
It was. Yes.
Paul Bowser from Boston.
Paul Bowser from out of Boston.
Yeah.
And Bowser was running primarily Boston and New England and in Los Angeles with Lou Darrow, the promoter over there, plus Toronto, Montreal, and Western New York and the Buffalo area, as well as New York occasionally. That was a little bit more contested, but he was based up in Boston.
Gotcha.
But yeah, he became the kind of top guy after Gus Sonnenberg for Paul Bowser. Had some great rivalries with Strangler Lewis, with Londos, with a lot of the wrestlers of that era. And he's a kind of forgotten figure. And I talk about that a bit in the book. I think what happened is those guys had these. Lou Thez was another contemporary. They wrestled for 40 years, 30, 40 years. Whereas Don only wrestled for about 12, 13. Then he joined the military with World War II, and by the time the war was done, he was finished with wrestling.
Oh, he was a veteran then.
Yes, yeah. So he had a kind of abbreviated career, and he moved on into other ventures and never really looked back.
So he had a fairly short career, 10, 12 years, and they got lured into promoting professional wrestling. How did that come about? How did he get lured into promotion?
He was an intelligent guy. He was college educated. He knew what he was doing. I think he had a really good head for the business of wrestling. He understood. He learned from the Olympics, which you look at somebody like Kurt Angle, who most recently coming from the Olympics, Olympic gold medalist, and just so quickly adapted to pro wrestling, which is a very difficult thing. A lot of Olympic wrestlers or amateur wrestlers struggle with that.
Sure.
Ed Don, like Kurt Angle, was kind of a natural. He came in, and within a year or so, they brought him in very slowly. He had matches that were very short until he kind of learned on the job and didn't expose the business and kind of came up. But he was a versatile performer who understood losing wasn't the end of the world. He was very well protected for the first 3 or 4 years of his career. He kind of put people over a little bit later on, but he always left it where there was a possibility for a promising rematch. He just understood the nuances of the game.
Hmm.
So I think it was really only natural once the war ended and he didn't want to get back in the ring. He was a little bit beaten up and, after serving, he put on a little bit of weight and thought, there's more money to be made in the office where, I'm running the show and counting the money than out there, fighting in the ring every night.
Yeah, he would be in a very small handful of guys who were Olympics competitors who could make that trend. The only other one or two I can think of Bob Roop, and
Mhm.
I don't know. I can't. Another one doesn't come to mind.
In
Uh,
terms of a promoter like that, no,
yeah,
not really. Yeah, he was
yeah. That's it. That's unique.
he was a smart guy. Again, college educated, so he was able to, be an athlete and be able to, in addition to running the promotion aspect, he was promoting shows in upstate New York as well as in Cuba and in Florida for a brief period. So he was running shows in Cuba up until Castro came in and he
Yeah,
had to kind of leave and get out of there.
sure.
But he also had some investments that he was involved with. He took care of the stocks. He had some land deals that he did. So he had a diversified portfolio and made a good bit of money during his run.
And did wrestling promotion fuel most of that? Is that he made his money and then it reinvested it in those other things, or
A lot of it he made as a wrestler and just banked. He,
I
he
see.
didn't live a particularly extravagant lifestyle, especially in his later years. It kind of comes out a bit more. I talk about in the book. I was able to interview quite a few of his surviving family members. He has 3 sons. All three are still with us. Several nieces and nephews and grandkids, so on. But they would talk about how he was just an unpretentious guy. He'd have maybe 2 suits, just kind of cheap suits, but he'd always wear the suit. But he wouldn't spend a lot because he knew he'd eventually burn it because he'd always smoke cigars. And occasionally a little errant ember would drop on it. He'd have little burns on his cuffs, and
Yeah.
he'd wait until he needed a new suit to buy a new suit. It was
Man,
just kind of
man after my own heart. Did
yeah.
did did he like bourbon too? If he did,
He
we
was
would
a
have.
beer and scotch man from
Oh
what his
yeah,
sons have told me. Yeah,
I'm out on the scotch, but we could have had a cigar together.
yeah.
So what does his just out of curiosity, what do his sons do?
The one son is an attorney. The other is a doctor.
Oh
The
my
third
gosh.
might be. I think he's a doctor too. I think he's in the medical field. I don't know if he's a chiropractor or what he is, but I think one attorney and 2 doctors.
Wow, very
I could be
successful.
wrong, but I believe that's correct.
I mean, that's a reflection of what kind of guy he was. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, yeah.
must
He
have been a
sent,
wonderful father.
sent the kids to private school, made sure that they had an education. Was very supportive. Uh, uh, giving money for them for college. He also helped many of his nieces and nephews and gave them money for college. College and education was very important. And there's a quote in the book that one of his nephews had said. He said that anyone can make money. It takes a real, a wise man to save it. And he saw a lot of wrestlers that he came up with go broke. Even guys like Gus Sonnenberg and others. You may think of that being a relatively recent phenomenon where pro wrestlers don't, they'd lose their money early. That was going on in the 20s and 30s,
Oh yeah,
especially,
yeah.
you know, Ed Don was on top during the Great Depression. So he was having matches against Londos and drawing over 30,000 people at a time where a lot of people were worried where dinner was going to come from,
Yeah,
so it's pretty incredible.
yeah, Steve Johnson made some mention of him in the Jim Londos book, and he sounds a lot like from the same mold as a Londos because Strangler Lewis wasn't like that. I mean,
No,
he didn't do very well with keeping his money. He was working right up until he passed away, either as a consultant or a manager or something like that, just to make some money to live the way he liked to live. But It sounds like Ed Don was more in the mold of Jim Londo's, where he was a real businessman.
He was. He absolutely was. And he didn't live cheaply. He saved, but he traveled to Europe throughout his life until at the very end, his health was pretty bad. He was hobbled by arthritis, walked with a cane, then had one leg amputated, and then eventually the second one.
Mm.
So which he always says, it's the price that pro wrestlers pay is arthritis and pain that you have for the rest of your life.
Is that why he had to have him amputated? Was it because of
Yeah,
arthritis?
he had a few different illnesses and a few things, but the arthritis is the main thing,
Yeah.
and then everything exacerbated from that.
Yeah, they didn't really know too much about treating that, for a long time. So,
Well, he survived. He passed away in 1985. So he had I mean, he was born in 1905 and had a long, like I said, becoming a star during the Depression, being involved with World War II, promoting in the post-war era, and then making it into the 80s. He just had this amazing 20th century life. And no matter where time took him or whatever the world global situation was, he managed to succeed.
I don't want to give away too much about the book because you guys need to go get it and you need to read this. I mean, if we're not stirring you up about this guy, then something you don't have your volume turned on or something. But what about his wife? How did they come together or meet or whatever?
They were neighbors, basically. She was much younger than he was, and they grew up on the same street in North Java, and he'd come home and met her, saw her when she was older, and as one of the sons had said, Mom would always say that she swept him off his feet, or he swept her off her feet,
Yeah.
and it was because when they first met, he had to actually pick her up and carry her over a ditch that was
Oh,
in front of the farmhouse.
wow.
So, but she, from what I was told, as a child, she would look out because she was about 15 years or so younger than him. She remembers seeing him running because he would run out in the hills of North Java as training, cardio training during college and becoming a wrestler and everything else. That he'd be out there running and doing road work and training. And she was a young girl and saw the neighbor out there running. And then, years later, they got married.
Oh my gosh. Sounds like a fantastic story. You
Yeah.
got it. Where did he serve? In Obviously in World War II, but did he serve in the Pacific or how? What?
No, he was kept at Chapel Hill. So
Okay.
he stayed in the U.S., but he was training the cadets on
Yeah.
hand-to-hand combat. He had the background in amateur wrestling, everything he learned in pro wrestling, and he picked up a lot of kind of what we would call shoot wrestling or dirty tactic fighting, basically joint manipulation, eye gouges, things like that. And he taught that to the cadets. There was a series of articles that he had done for some newspapers that ended up being syndicated on how to defend yourself against an attacker. And he trained police force after the war. He went in and worked with them on how to subdue a potential gunman or somebody, and also did some things for some newspapers on women,
Mm.
for women who, if you find yourself in a bad date scenario, how to, escape and
Yeah,
protect
sure.
yourself.
Yeah,
So, which is again pretty novel for that time period.
sure. Well, God bless him. So when did he stop promoting professional wrestling? What was his last year as a promoter? Do you know?
He ended up selling the upstate New York office to Pedro Martinez,
Martinez? Yeah.
and I believe that was in 1958, off the top of my head.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, he was,
So,
and then
so did he?
Cuba, he left with Castro coming in.
So I'm trying to rack my brain and remember, was he a member of the National Wrestling Alliance?
Yes,
Okay. So
yes.
what do you think of that? Do you know? You
What
know
his thoughts on the
what
NWA?
what his thoughts on it were, or what his opinion was, or
He didn't. He was quoted pretty often, but he was always quoted. I don't want to say in character. I think he was just as a very astute promoter.
Mhm.
He made good relationships with the local newspapers. He'd give comments every once in a while. He'd talk about his upcoming shows and talk about somebody who's on the card and get publicity.
Of course.
So he'd speak, but he never really said a lot. He didn't spill the beans on anything political. He didn't have any heat with anybody that came out. if there were any disagreements or anything like that, that all pretty much stayed behind closed doors.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you always look at something like that depending on which side of the fence you're on. I mean, if you're in business and you're a promoter, it's something you are a part of that helps protect your business. But if you're on the outside looking in and you can't come against it, it's evil and awful. So
Yeah,
just kind
yeah.
of depends on your perspective. But did he
Yeah, he
have
was involved.
did he have much in the way of competition? Did many people try to run in his towns or anything like that?
There were some smaller kind of outlaw promotions that were out there, especially in the upstate New York area. Uh, he really kind of had the lion's share of everything. I know that there
Yeah.
were some little renegade promotions going. The center of his area was in Buffalo. Memorial Auditorium was the big arena that was built right after World War II. And he had the first wrestling show there, and that was really kind of the center of his empire.
Yeah,
So anybody else is doing little small kind of spot shows and not really competition.
yeah. Do you have any idea what Pedro gave him for it or
Oh,
paid?
the exact dollar amount? I do have it in the book, but
Well, it's
off
in
the
the
top of
book.
my
Yeah,
head, I can't.
that's okay. I'll
It
read it.
is, yes.
Yeah, awesome. I'll read it. So where did he go to live in his later years? Like where did he wind up his life?
He split his time between Western New York and Florida. He kind of snowbirded a little bit. He was down in Fort Lauderdale and in that area, and then he would return to Buffalo when he could. Um, there's a good story that one of his sons told me that's in the book. He was really kind of pining for North Java. It's a little small country town here, and he just missed it. And they brought him back, and this is when he was, I think he had both legs amputated at that point, or he was at the very least hobbled. I don't know if both were gone quite then. But they brought him back to see everybody, and there was a sense almost that this may be the last time he comes back. And as it turns out, it was.
Oh, man.
But the son was telling me, it wasn't a morbid thing or anything. It was he really still appreciates that he was able to be there and do that with his dad, because his dad just loved being back in Western New York so much. So
Hmm.
it was kind of a sweet little thing, and they were able to do it as a family.
Oh, wonderful. That's fantastic. Did he have a place what kind of place did he live in there? Do you know? I mean, was it just a small home or did he have a piece of property or did he live in an apartment or what did he
No, he
live?
had he had a few. He had a place here in the city, and the funny thing about this, the place that he had in Buffalo, he had an office downtown, but he also had the house where the family. Um, I was writing the book. I was working on it one day. It took me about 5 years to do the book from start to finish.
Oh my gosh.
Um, yeah, it was interrupted with COVID and some other
Oh yeah,
things.
I
So it was kind of
understand.
starts and stops. But I was in a coffee house
Well,
on
can I
off of.
interrupt? Can I
Yes,
interrupt you for just
please.
a second? Yeah, it always is funny because you will see somebody talk about their book or whatever, and a fan will say, "When's the next one going to be out?" And you're like, "Man, you have no idea what it took to do this one." So 5 years. That's pretty amazing. Sorry,
Yeah,
going
and
on
in
with
that
your.
time, like I said, COVID was one, but I also I got remarried, became a stepfather, a lot of things, moved. So a lot of time that I used to spend writing became going to the kids' track meets or taking them to soccer, so
Sure.
it took a little bit. Life kind of got in the way a little bit, but it all
Well,
worked out and
well,
happened.
the thing about it is, and I've learned this from trying to figure out, and my favorite kind of a book is a biography.
Oh,
And I've always loved them because I've just thought, it takes somebody 80, 90 years to live a life, and it takes you maybe 2 or 3 months to read it. It's just the most amazing thing in the world to be able to absorb that person's entire life in just a short amount of time with all their wins, all their losses, all their lessons they learned, all the mistakes they made. And I just think there's no better growth and development tool in the world than a biography if you really pay attention to it and you absorb it. It's not, and I don't mean this negatively or trying to downgrade anybody, but it's not like you're writing the next James Patterson, book that's, 14 episodes of it and it just comes out one right after another. I mean, to study somebody's life and really capture the essence of it is not an easy thing to do.
yeah, this is my first time trying a biography, and it definitely was a challenge. But that's a great point. I think you're right about biographies is a way to learn about somebody and not just a story that somebody told.
Yeah.
But this one point, I was in this coffee house on Hurdle Avenue in Buffalo, working on the book, and I had to clarify something. So I called one of Ed Don's sons. I'm like, where was the address of the house? Where did you live? He goes, oh, I was on Parker Boulevard. I look out the window. I'm at the intersection of Hurdle and Parker. So what number? And he tells me, I'm like, was that right near Hurdle Avenue? He goes, yeah, about 5 houses in. Like, hold on 1 minute. So I left my laptop in the coffee house. I walked across, and took a picture of the house. I'm like, is this it? So, oh my God, it looks exactly the same. That was the house I grew up in.
Yeah.
So it was kind of neat that one of the places I was going to like get away from everything and sit down and focus on the book, it was less than 100 yards away from the house where Don lived. So,
Oh, that's fantastic. That's
serendipity.
That's serendipitous right there. You're on the right track when something like that happens. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm getting the signals. I'm going in the right direction. Okay, man. Well, this is awesome. Ed Don George. Is that the simple title and name of the book?
Well, I went back and forth, changed it up a few times, but ended up going with Ed Don George, The Remarkable Life of an Olympian and Pro Wrestling Champion.
That's fantastic. Show that again for everybody. Show
Yeah.
them the book there. There you go. Ed Don George, The Remarkable Life of an Olympian and Pro Wrestling Champion. Just fantastic. Yep, you guys need to get that. What was the thing that you think affected you the most in writing the book?
I think just an appreciation for how wild the pro wrestling scene was in the 1930s. I mean, it's wrestling has this habit of kind of eating its own past. The stars of yesterday put over the stars of today, and it's cyclical and ongoing. And we tend to, like you mentioned earlier, the recency bias type thing. We always think of everything as being bigger and better today than it used to be. But you go back and you see the wrestlers from the 30s, you read about them, the stories. I mean, there are some tapes that you can find on YouTube and other places. But they were just as bigger than life than as some of the wrestlers today, more so in a lot of cases. They had signature moves and finishing moves. They had controversies and these crazy finishes for matches that wouldn't be out of place today,
Right.
It really just kind of, you look at the talent that was getting into wrestling at that time. A lot of people like Ed Don, who were college athletes who were coming in. Wayne Munn was another. You had people coming in from football like Gus Sonnenberg and things like that. And then the old vets who'd been around like Strangler Lewis, and then guys like Fez. Like, it was the industry at a real crossroads. And it's just kind of fascinating to see all of those moving pieces, all the rival promoters, the beginnings of the NWA as an organization coming out. It's a fascinating time in pro wrestling history.
Yeah, I was just I'm doing a series of shows on the Briscoe and Bradshaw show about the life of Jim Barnett. And what's funny is we go through back when he started, like right before 1950, and we go through the 50s, then we get to the 60s, and Jerry and John and I were sitting there like that just happened again, like 10 years after that. It's the same scenario with different people,
Yeah.
and the same thing in the 70s with different people, and the same thing in the 80s with different people. It's funny how cyclical it really is with scenarios, and we think every time we come to our era, we think, oh man, this is original. This is new, but
It's all recycled, all variations on a theme.
yeah, yeah. There's only what 6 or 7 stories they say,
Yeah.
So we get to see them all in pro wrestling.
What is it? A man goes on a journey, a stranger comes to town, and there's something else. Like those are the 3 archetypes.
Two guys walk in a bar. All right, man. Listen, thank you so much. Dan Murphy, everybody. The book's Ed Don George. You need to get it. Read about one of wrestling's great people that maybe you haven't heard of as much, but I mean, hey, if you've been listening and watching this, you know what kind of life this guy had, and you need to experience it through Dan's writing, a true professional. So, Dan, thank you. I hope you'll come back. I know you'll have another book coming sometime. I'm not rushing you, but you'll have another one, or come back and we'll thumb through one of the other 2 books and stop down on a couple different people. That might be fun. Talk about that too.
That sounds great. Anytime. Tony, thank you very much for having me.
Dan Murphy, everybody, right here on Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel Podcast, and stand by. We'll be back again in a little bit.
Relive the glory days of Memphis wrestling with the Retro Wrestling Review USWA podcast. Each week, we go back in time to review USWA Championship Wrestling from the 1990s, episode by episode. Join us for watch-alongs, behind-the-scenes stories, and exclusive interviews with people who were there and lived it. Whether you grew up watching it or you're discovering it for the first time, this podcast is your ringside seat to Memphis wrestling history. It's all a part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Listen now at USWApodcast.com.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Dan Murphy. What a great historian, what a great writer. He's contributed so much to the canon of pro wrestling history that we have now available, that we can pick up and we can read and we can learn and we can enjoy days gone by because of guys like Dan Murphy. Speaking of that, I have maybe one of the most prominent Japanese wrestling historians who's ever lived. I mean, he's been around for quite some time. In this conversation about Japan in 1975, and we're just covering the first half of 75, and we're going to talk about the Champions Carnival. We're going to talk about Giant Baba. We're going to talk about Antonio Inoki. We're going to talk about New Japan. And the great Fumi Saito is going to take us back to the origins of Japanese wrestling all the way up to 1975. And we're going to talk about those two critical tournaments that took place in the spring of 1975, and the connections and the personalities and the country of Japan and the television and all the back office dealings and the great buildings that they wrestled in. That's all coming up right here, right now, in my conversation with Fumi Saito. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Personalities, Territories, Towns, and Buildings. This is Tony Richards, your host, and today we've got an extra special treat because my special guest is Fumi Saito, who's coming to us from Tokyo, Japan, and we're going to be talking about, first of all, the history of Japanese wrestling, and also we're going to be talking about 50 years ago, this spring, which was 1975, the third Champions Carnival tournament and the second World League in All Japan and New Japan, and Fumi's going to take us through all that. Fumi, my friend, welcome to the show.
Hello from Japan.
Yes.
Hello from Tokyo. How are you?
I'm good, man. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for joining us. I'm so happy to tap into your vast knowledge of Japanese wrestling history.
Okay.
You've written several books. Tell us about some of the books that you've written on this subject.
Actually, I've written about 30 books on wrestling in general, wrestling history book, the whole bunch of interview books, wrestling, the whole book on Bruiser Brody, a book on Ricky Dozan, a book on Jan Baba and Antonio Inoki, the one book called Season's Greetings, that the Christmas wrestling, the Christmas story on wrestling, and quite
Fantastic.
about 30 of them. Yeah.
Now, tell us about your latest book. You just released a book just a couple of months ago.
Back in December, I released a book on Ricky Dozan. I'm writing a new book on that's coming out this Christmas. That I have to be working on it now, but it's every good guy needs a bad guy theme.
All right, yeah.
A history of babyface and heels.
Every babyface needs a heel, and every heel needs a babyface. That's right. Well, listen, let's talk about how did you get interested in wrestling?
Oh, when I was 3 years old, when you were very little,
Mm-hmm.
you go stay at your parents' house. I mean, your grandparents' house for a week, right? Or
Yes.
sometimes, My grandfather was watching wrestling on black and white TV. I sat next to him and I watched.
Oh, wow. And so
I was 3 years old, and I discovered wrestling before you discover Batman and Superman.
I think I was the opposite. I think Batman and Superman was first, and then I saw wrestling. Then I saw wrestling, and I'm like, wow, this is like the real thing. Not a comic.
And also, it's ongoing. When you watch Batman and Superman, it's always somewhat of reruns of things. But wrestling comes out every Friday night, and
That's right.
yeah.
Well, I would imagine your grandfather became a fan back at the beginnings.
Rikidozen era.
Yeah, when
And in
wrestling first came.
Japan, that the beginning of wrestling was the beginning of television. And beginning of television, therefore, was beginning of wrestling.
Isn't it funny? I was just on the Briscoe and Bradshaw show, and we were talking about how wrestling and television had this marriage where
Of course.
they grew each other. Television
grew
was
each other.
good for wrestling, and wrestling was so good for television around the world.
Yeah, and especially the post-war, there was a war, World War II, and the war's over in 1945, and television starts 6 years later. There was a GHQ occupation, GHQ, General Headquarters. Believe it or not, U.S. and Japan had a war.
Right.
Yeah.
And so talk a little bit more about that. So the GHQ, that was the American occupation, right?
Yeah, General Headquarters, General MacArthur.
Yeah. And so that caused this influx of American culture into Japan that hadn't existed before?
And the new constitution and U.S. occupation. And as a matter of fact, there are still U.S. bases, 120 U.S. base around Japan to this day. Yeah,
Wow.
but we became ally after the war,
Right.
and there was 1951, 6 years after the war, there was a San Francisco peace signing, and Japan became independent again.
Mm-hmm.
Then following year, television starts,
Right.
and same 1951, the Bobby Brands, the wrestling troupe, had a tribute to troops tour, the American style professional wrestling 1951. Former sumo wrestler Ricky Dozen joined the show and debuted as an American style professional wrestler.
And
That's how it began.
for those of you who are not familiar, Bobby Bruns he was from here and out of the Missouri wrestling office.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Midwest.
Yeah,
Very much.
he was here in St. Louis and Kansas City. And he
Before there was NWA.
yes, that's right. And so he was one of the people who brought wrestling into Japan.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, there was like a other group of people, like Jim Londos and his people tried, but the Bobby Brown's crew and also Al Karasik, the Hawaiian promoter at the time, there was a plan that LA, San Francisco, that the Malkovich people, and Bobby Brown's people, and Hawaii, the El Karasik. There was going to be California, Hawaii, Japan, like tour line, to be created.
Like a Pacific Rim type thing, right?
Yeah, like to make wrestling more international, which is independent from NWA. We'll be talking about National Wrestling Alliance a lot today,
Yeah.
but so a lot of people, it's almost like a myth that the Ricky Dozen, with his strong imagination, former sumo superstar turned American style professional wrestler. He became superstar in the ring and also promoter in Japan and had a huge success. But he was also assigned by American, promoters. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, he was
That part wasn't so acknowledged in Japan.
so pardon me if I'm skipping around and not in line with where you're going, but what about Sonny Myers? Didn't he play a role too?
Sonny Myers, a little bit later on, came in as a wrestler.
Yeah. He's from here in Missouri too. That's why I was asking.
Yeah, I know. And also he helped Antonio Inoki's very first outlaw group, Tokyo Pro Wrestling. So Inoki opened his very years before New Japan. When Inoki was 23 years old, he opened his very first outlaw promotion called Tokyo Pro Wrestling in 1966. Sonny Myers was sending American wrestler to Inoki.
Oh wow, I didn't know. I'm learning things here.
Yeah,
So-
but plus, Sonny Myers had a few tours with Ricky Dozen's JWA, Japan Wrestling Association.
Yeah, when did JWA
Nippon Pro
form?
Wrestling. Huh?
When did JWA form?
1953 with Ricky Dozen's. Yeah.
So as
Ricky Dozen debuted with Bobby Brands, but it was just after 2 weeks training under Andre Adre, Bobby Brands, Harold Sakata, and they just practiced for 2 weeks and had him debut right away. The debut match, of course, was against Bobby Brands.
Oh wow.
Yeah, September of 1951. Then he spent the rest of 1952, the whole year in San Francisco, Rikidozan.
And backs away, invites Mr. Blassie to step out. Blassie goes out to the choke. Rikidozan, great strong neck resistance. A judo chop again. It looked like a tooth went up in the air that time. A quick snap mare. Dozan missed and went out on the apron. His head hit the buckle between the top rope and the corner post. His head hit that buckle going from the rope to the corner post. He's hurt. Head hit that buckle and he's bleeding. His forehead is bleeding. Judo chop from his knees. Rikidozan was knocked out temporarily there for a few seconds. Head to the right hand into the middle. Judo chop to the face. You may see a new champion here in a minute. The blood is getting in the eyes of Rikidozan. Blassie bites at the spot where he was cut. He clutches Blassie and slams him to the left. He's bleeding profusely at the forehead. He clutches Blassie again, but Blassie backs away. Pulls him out away from the rope. Now clutches. Now slams. And again he's foul but short. And another karate cut drops Blassie. He tries for a press. Only to 1 second from a new world champion right there. Blassie going at that cut. Fighting again in that cut. Chops, but he was short. Rikidozan threatening again, but the blood is in his eyes. Heavy bleeding in the forehead. And still he judo chops Blassie and drops him in the corner. The referee wants the doctor to look at his cut. He pushes the referee away. He doesn't want the referee to see it. The referee wants to look at that cut. He says, no, walk away. Go away, he says. He kicks Blassie. Blassie again, punching at that cut. He takes a judo chop and it's dropped. Rikidozan drops him. Only one. Again, they missed the judo chop. The blood is in his eyes. He only sees a little out of his left eye. Rikidozan still bleeding profusely at the forehead. He doesn't see well. He missed again. He was hurt when he hit that. Again, he's making him miss. And Blassie now knows he has an advantage. Rikidozan doesn't see well with the blood in his eyes. Missed at least a half a dozen chops. Again, Blassie bites in that cut. The referee looking again at the bleeding. He's bleeding very profusely from that cut. He can't see. He almost hit the referee. Again, Blassie bites at that cut. Still, he stays in there. Again, Rikidozan misses. He can't see. He's choked by Blassie. Again, Blassie bites in that cut. Rikidozan trying to clear his head. Oh, he can't see. And the fans are just heartbroken here to see this great gentleman now unable to really throw his punches. The referee is looking at him very carefully. Blassie follows it up. He pushes the referee away again. He doesn't want to be examined. Again he misses. And this great crowd tonight, seeing their favorite, his eyes blurred with blood, miss time after time with his judo chop. Hitting only when he's in close enough to feel the man. Blassie choking. The referee again looks at that cut, says that'll be all. He's told it. Bellkeeper to hit the bell. He's told the bellkeeper to hit the bell. Blassie continues to punch. No, stay away. Togo says stay away. But the referee has called for the bell. He calls for Dr. Vandevender to come up on the apron. The Athletic Commission doctor is up on the apron here now. Dr. Vandevender is coming into the ring. Blassie continuing to cut. Ricky Dozan wants to continue, but he can't see with that blood in his eyes, particularly his right eye. He wants to continue, and the fans are saying yes. Some are saying no, no more. Blassie still continues to throw punches and to make enemies of the fans here. The referee says, Doctor, look at that cut. And let's get the doctor's opinion. There it is! Blassie wins the fall. And there's no more. The doctor says he cannot continue. Well, in my book, there is a wrestler and a gentleman who should be the winner, Ricky Dozan. Let's get it officially from Jim.
Ladies and gentlemen, after 16 minutes, 23 seconds, your referee, Johnny Red Shoes Dugan, stops the match. Ricky Dozan severely cut, unable to continue. The winner, Freddie Blassie. The winner and undisputed heavyweight champion of the world out of Missouri now claims the belt, Freddie Blassie.
There it is, the belt, the championship to Freddie Blassie. In my book, and I may be just one of at least 10,000 here tonight, Ricky Dozan is the finest wrestler in that ring and should be the world's heavyweight wrestling champion this minute.
How long did it take? How long did it take before they started? The country started embracing it, and it started growing.
Actually, the instant huge mega hit boom, 1954, upon Ricky Dozan's return, and Nippon Television, that the opening of network television, the new channel, they got Ricky Dozan. And this was, the television was new, wrestling was new, and of course it's like we have like a sumo culture, the judo, the martial arts, that this new world that Japan reviving, the post-war boom, that television beginning, that you needed a new hero in Ricky Dozan, and Ricky Dozan. With another new wrestler, Masahiko Kimura, the former judo world champion, became wrestling tag team, went against Sharp Brothers on television. Sharp Brothers was built, as a world tag team champions. Yeah. And the first big match at the Sumo Palace, and Japanese wrestling had network television from the day one, 1954. Wow. Yeah.
So in the mid 50s, then the boom starts. They start
54 to be exact.
Yeah, they start drawing to their shows, and people are watching the television and coming out and buying tickets and coming. And so Ricky Dozan's run, how long was that?
Until 1963.
Okay.
December of 1963, he suddenly died. All right, actually, good 10 years, 1954 to 1963, like 10-year period. 54, you had the historical Rikidosa and Kimura against Sharp Brothers, beginning of television, beginning of wrestling thing. Then the same year, December of 54, Rikidozan against Masahiko Kimura, the former sumo champion against the former judo champion, both becoming professional wrestler, collides. Then Rikidozan beat Kimura to become the king. Yeah, I mean Kimura was like a Kimura just happened to be a wrestler who essentially was still judoka.
Hmm.
He never understood wrestling. And he Rikidozan and Kimura became wrestler in two different paths. That Kimura, the previous years, he went to Hawaii to teach judo. And when he went to Hawaii, wait a minute, this is wrestling. So he was put in a wrestling ring.
You're right, right.
Yeah.
Instead of being in
But
his home environment.
yeah, because he went over there to teach judo. But when he went to Hawaii, it was all of a sudden, you'll be in the ring today. And it's like, what is it? It's called professional wrestling.
Yeah,
But he was making in 1950, two money, like $300 a match.
yeah,
And also, he was able to purchase all kinds antibiotic, which was still not available in Japan. His wife back home and a lot of people he knew had lung disease. I mean, that's like a disease of the era.
yeah.
And he was able to make money, and then he chose wrestling as a profession, but he never really knew what the wrestling was about.
Hmm.
Interesting. Ricky Dawson knew from the day one he was going to be the king of this new genre.
So, how did the fans react to Kimura and Ricky Dozan? Were they split? Was it more the fans?
It
Fans,
was like the match of the century already. The first year of professional wrestling boom, but the two stars was going to collide. Yeah,
yeah. And so,
one way
did
or
the
another.
did the audience sway one way or the other? I mean, so
It was
there,
more like wrestling was so new that it was just exciting, not like cheering for Ricky Dos and cheering for, it's not divided. It's like, what's going to happen?
so when in the history did the baby face and heel dynamic come in?
Um, it's always been pretty subtle in Japan.
Hmm.
Even to this day, they don't have promo like Mike. When they have Mike, they do that in the ring. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
In Japanese wrestling, never had this studio wrestling 1 hour format. Always televised arena shows
Hmm.
from Ricky Dozan days to JWA days, Baba and Inoki, younger Giant Baba, younger Anthony Inoki together in JWA. Um, Always against Japanese babyface against Americans that are treated like a heel, but you have people like Luthez, you have people like Carl Gotch or Mil Maskers, not gonna be heel.
Right.
But soon, um, just like we talked about, 10 minutes ago, that every good guy needs bad guy thing, and when All Japan started, it was Jan Baba, the big baby his, right? It was Abdullah the Butcher's spot.
Right.
1973, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Anthony Inoki against Tiger Jeet Singh all year long.
Right.
So it's like a set, it's your Reed Law in movie, in the cast.
Yeah, but everything happened in
James Bond and a bad guy. Yeah.
everything happened in the arena and everything happened in the ring, right? I mean,
Yeah, but there are storylines,
yeah.
who betrayed who or who ran into the certain guy's match or the bloody match the week before your title match, something like that.
So Ricky Dozan, he dies in 1963,
Yeah.
and then
But Ricky Dawson 10 years was very well calculated. We got to go through real quick though. But
Yeah,
the
sure.
54 Sharp Brothers, right? Sharp Brothers, end of 54, Ricky Dawson against Kimura, right? And already 54 Asian heavyweight title, Ricky Dawson against King Kong. You know,
And
And
so and did I don't mean to jump ahead, but is this how Baba and Inoki thought in later years about how to structure the year out and do the year after year kind of storylines like Ricky Dozan had for the 10-year period?
all right, let's put it that way: that what Ricky Dozan learned as a promoter and wrestler, and what Jan Baba and what Inoki learned as a wrestler and promoters, that they're from different era actually.
Hmm.
Baba spent years in America traveling like Andre the Giant before there was Andre the Giant.
Right,
Giant
right.
Baba was already touring. Okay, Inoki and Baba both debuted 1965. Both Ricky Dozan's student. And Baba was sent to former Giants pitcher, already famous, and he's huge, tall guy, and a great athlete in his days. That he was already sent to America in '62 with the management of Great Togo. He was traveling all over, like New York, the Ohio, the Detroit, you know, the 60 eras, big territories, and
Yes.
already main event, like second year rookie. And Inoki, 18-year-old Inoki stayed at Ricky Dozan's home, and he wasn't able to go to America until Ricky Dozan's death. Yeah. So it was a little bit, Baba jump started, but Inoki was more like a rookie,
Yeah,
you
right.
know,
But both of these guys are coexisting in 65 and 66 in JWA, right?
until 71.
Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
were they were tag team partners, right?
1967 on, yes.
So
Baba
we're
was much bigger star in through the 60s, Inoki was always underdog chasing Baba, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Then when they were together, international tag team champion. Yeah. But Inoki didn't get any singles championship belt until like 71. They had to create United National title.
And so did that benefited Inoki then being
What
being with
being
Baba?
underdog? Yeah,
Yeah,
like me growing up, that Giant Baba obviously plays as bigger star and the leader of BI platoon, BI Baba and Inoki, BI
mhm.
platoon. That the two stars, but obviously Inoki being number two though. You
Right.
know,
Obvious. Yeah. Great. And so what causes them to leave JWA?
Actually, after Ricky Dawson died in December of '63, four guys, Yoshino Sato, Kokichi Endo, Toyonobori, and Michiaki Yoshimura, four guys are running the company. You know what I'm saying? And first, Toyonobori got fired and starts Tokyo Pro Wrestling and get Inoki as his number one guy. Inoki, 23-year-old Inoki, upon his return from America, joins, and bring people like Johnny Valentine to win the U.S. heavyweight title, but they didn't survive without TV. Inoki joins back JWA in '67. But Giant Baba was always a star, after Ricky Dozan's. Ricky Dozan had an international heavyweight title, right? They were going to retire the title, but they revived international heavyweight title for Baba, and then Baba was the one, held this international heavyweight title as a company champ, like a top guy. And he always had every single American superstar come in, Dick the Bruiser, the Crusher, the Bobo Brazil, the Gene Kaniski, whatnot, Fritz Von Erich, all year long. All these superstars come in one by one at a time and challenge John Baba for the title, and Baba beat everybody. You know what I'm
Wow.
saying?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that gets to your NWA story. Tonight we're talking a lot about NWA.
Right. So
Well, we have to get to 1975 though.
well, that's okay. We'll get there.
All right, but the end of '71, there was like a coup within JWA, because we're drawing so many people, and it's like a second booming Jan Baba and Inoki combination being so popular, and the wrestling show on NTV, Nippon Television Channel 4, every Friday night live, and it's like the cultural, thing that the whole, almost like the whole country. When I was a little kid, Friday night, 8 o'clock meant wrestling, and also Friday night was the night that there was no baseball.
Yeah.
That helped.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
anyhow,
awesome.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
because
awesome.
during the baseball season, people watch baseball. you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
But
Also
wrestling,
just absolutely huge in Japan, baseball.
yeah, oh, real huge. Yeah, it
Yeah.
still is.
Yeah.
Um, so so many, I mean, so many shows, like close to 300 shows a year, all drawing and network, like when people knew anything about TV rights, right? Today they talk about TV rights and annual fee, the contract with Netflix and all these huge money thing. Japan was doing that decades before that, that NTV Channel 4 paying JWA certain amount of money every year, contract. Well, the same way that the TV Asahi was paying, New Japan Pro Wrestling
Hmm.
an annual fee. Therefore, you have budget, millions of dollar budget. Anyhow, that the JWA at the time, 1971, was making a lot of money. The Inoki felt that, but we're not making that much money. Then there was a Inoki group people to have coup within JWA, and Inoki was the only one got fired
Oh,
from it.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Inoki got fired from JWA then.
Yeah, December of 1971.
So that was his departure. So what happened to Baba then?
Baba, knowing Inoki's coup, didn't tell the company about it, but the Baba also knew how rotten the management was,
Mm.
and but Baba, as like precisely like really like he's very conservative. That not like Inoki did. Inoki tried to have real coup within the company and kick seniors out of there, and then we'll run the company, right?
Hmm.
And not too many wrestlers followed it, and didn't think it was possible, But Inoki got fired by JWA December of 1971, then started his own New Japan Pro Wrestling March of 1972. Okay, that's one. Baba worked all the way till like the summer of 72. And when the TV contract was about to, to expire and resign again, that was Nippon Television, Channel 4, NTV people and told Baba, leave these old farts in TV station and you, Baba, create new company.
Mm.
So Baba had NTV's blessing, network television's blessing, right from the get-go, and he announced his formation of All Japan Pro Wrestling in July of 1972, and already had a first show in October of that year.
So so the creation of All Japan Pro Wrestling was actually a television idea. They
Yeah,
came
yeah, but almost under the table because technically they were still JWA.
right,
You
right,
know?
right.
And the
They
problem was though, JWA had two network stations, one company, as of 1969, then NET, now TV Asahi. TV Asahi had the JWA wrestling show on Monday night, and Channel 4 NTV had JWA wrestling show on Friday night. So JWA was getting two different money from two different network channel. Crazy idea, right?
right.
Eventually became All Japan and New Japan, inevitable, right? And I think that Yoshino Sato, that Kokichi Endo, and Michiaki Yoshimura, and all like Rikidozan era executive former wrestlers,
Hmm.
they were making a lot of money. And Baba Inoki being just top star employee, right? Like they're barely 30 years old,
Right.
But
So so Baba ends up starting his company second.
yeah, 6 months. Yeah, actually, Inoki started 6 months before that
Yeah,
with
but
no TV, no
but
TV.
but Inoki doesn't fortify his company or anything. He doesn't make the American National Wrestling Alliance connection or anything like that. Baba does that when he starts his company, right? I mean, Inoki
Pretty
kind of
much right from the get go. Yeah.
Inoki kind of left himself open there.
Well, Inoki wasn't as famous among American promoters, and also when Inoki formed the new company, Inoki who, right?
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
he
I mean, like, this is going to be a very good topic for you and I because wrestling in Japan is not part of American wrestling territory map.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
it's independent from it,
Mhm.
and also, and National Wrestling Alliance isn't necessarily above Japan wrestling in Japan. Affiliated, and it's good to have membership, so American promoters can send all the top talent to certain company, but not necessarily loyal to Baba. Just didn't know how important Inoki was until Muhammad Ali fight.
Right. I see.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Then they realized that there are two different network television running two different wrestling companies, and there must be two different major league of professional wrestling in Japan. Therefore, two kings who never worked together again.
But in 1971, that wasn't the mindset.
1972, yeah.
Yeah.
Then
That
Carl
was.
Gotch was the only one helping Inoki.
Yeah, that wasn't the mindset at all. The mindset was Inoki is just this guy that just kind of started his own company. We don't really know if he's going to be
Like
successful.
independent.
Yes, but Baba is going to, I mean, they just automatically thought he'd be successful because he's a big star.
Yeah, and then also had a network television.
Yes. Yeah, with
And
Channel
after
4.
Baba and Inoki both left, who do they have on JWA, right? Sakaguchi, Seiji Sakaguchi and Kintaro Oki as a top star. Yeah,
Yes.
they did keep the television for another 6 7 months, but Sakaguchi decided to join Anthony Inoki and took TV Asahi deal with him. Therefore, as of April '73, Inoki finally had the channel. Yeah.
So, how help me with the connection, two connections to the United States here. One connection is with the Funks in Amarillo
Yeah.
because they're helping get American talent, and then the other one is the connection with the NWA. How important was it to a Japanese wrestling?
Actually, are you
How?
talking about Giant Baba's All Japan Pro Wrestling?
Yes.
Yeah, well, NWA connection is not even direct. It's always the Funks.
Okay.
Funks is the NWA.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so
So
how important was it?
sometimes Giant Baba will invite somebody like some Machinik over for 1 week vacation, but it was the Funks making a phone call through Dory and Terry Funk all over the United States, from NWA Georgia, NWA Florida, even Tennessee, the Crockett's, Dick the Bruisers, Indianapolis, not necessarily NWA, but Detroit,
Mhm.
all these companies, not necessarily the direct phone call to Baba. It was always through Dory or Terry making a phone call.
So
Therefore, you have all the American superstars.
so how important was it to a Japanese wrestling fan that the NWA World Title was going to be affiliated with All Japan?
Well, it's different because for magazine or reading oriented wrestling fans, NWA meant a lot. But for the network television viewer, not as important as we led to believe. You know what I'm
I
saying?
see. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
because
the heart of my question is how important was it really in Japan?
um, okay, here's an example. 1957, back in 1957, the Ricky Dozan era,
Mhm.
the world heavyweight champion Luthes finally came to Japan. And the world champion Luthes against Ricky Dozan at the Korakuen Stadium, not the Korakuen Hall,
Mhm.
Korakuen Baseball Stadium. Korakuen Hall, Luthes against Ricky Dozan, the first world heavyweight championship match. And the name NWA was never once mentioned, you know?
Yes, he was just the world champion.
World champion, yeah. And what was interesting is, like, we'll get to that, but you wanted to talk about Gene Kaniski, right?
Yes.
Gene Kiniski, as an NWA World Heavyweight Champion, came to Japan 1967 and 1968, 2 years in a row, with that black leather, Paracana, Buddy Rogers belt.
Yes.
He was clearly wearing that belt in Japan, both tours, 1967 and 1968. Gene Kiniski came to Japan, not once defended NWA title. He instead challenged Giant Baba's international title.
I see.
Isn't that interesting?
Uh-huh. Well,
Yeah.
that was the important title to the Japanese audience.
Yeah, and also for that the sound of it, world champion and international champion. That sounds equal, doesn't it?
It does. Yes.
Yeah.
So
And
how did that?
same thing with Bruno Sammartino. 1967, 1968, two years in a row, same format. Bruno Sammartino was WWF championship belt, that, the velvet,
Yeah.
the
Yes.
original WWF. 67, 68, two tours. Bruno Sammartino came with that belt and was wearing that belt in the ring, but he never defended WWF title in Japan. Instead, he challenged Giant Baba's international title.
Yes.
And 4 matches, Kinski, Bruno, 4 60-minute broad.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so they kept strong,
Yeah. Yeah.
like.
Well, that's going to tie into what we've got to talk about today. Now, how did did the perception change at all when Dory Funk Jr. became the champion?
Right, 1969. 1969, after he beat Gene Kaniski for NWA title, it was finally acknowledged. NWA, the biggest governing body of professional wrestling. This is the closest thing to undisputed world title, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And also, Gene Kaniski was like from Ricky Dozan era, had a single match World League Championship with Toyo Nobori, and he looks like an old champion, right? But
Right.
this 28-year-old Dory Funk Jr. with father Dory Funk Sr. seconding him with
Yes.
cowboy hat and all these things,
Yeah.
coming out of the port, new era. So NWA World Champion first was acknowledged 1969 with Dory Funk Jr.
And so they come in and do a match for the JWA in 70.
Yeah, JWP. And as a champion, NWA World Champion, Inoki challenged Dory and Baba challenged Inoki. So people realize there must be something above international title. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's when NWA name became so important.
And I think I told you this when I interviewed you for my funk book, is that I'm so glad we have that. I'm so glad we have the tape of those matches to see Dory Funk Sr. working at ringside and how subtle he is. He doesn't really do a lot, but the couple of things he does, it's amazing because you don't get a lot of crowd reaction in Japan. But he got some reaction.
Not 1960s fans, right?
Yeah, he just looked like he was going to break the rule, or just looked like he was going to
Or
interfere.
touch something, sweep leg, Inoki's
Yeah.
leg or something. Yeah.
Yeah. It just the intention of it got fans, attention.
And also father protecting son,
yes,
and they look like son and father son combo,
Oh, absolutely. And I love your description of him, having the hat and being from Amarillo. And one of the things you told me when we talked, and I just want to touch on it briefly here, is just the perception of Amarillo, Texas, in Japan to
Is
wrestling,
as famous as Dallas or Houston or Austin
or New York City.
Well, that's different. New York city, but when you see Texas, they assume it's all cowboys, cowboy hat, the cowboy boots, the Wrangler jeans, and flannel shirt, and all these things. And the Funk family came in like that. He had a suit and tie and everything, but you had a thing in a cowboy hat with it.
Yeah. Well, I didn't mean just the perception of the cities, but just the perception in a wrestling fan's mind.
Yeah, yeah.
Amarillo was very important.
They don't realize it's just town with 200,000 people.
Yes,
you know?
right. Yes.
Yeah.
But it was a center of the wrestling world because of the
for a long time. Yeah, not the center, but the something almost like a sister city to Japan. It gets even bigger because the 1972 Munich Olympic, former Olympian Tommy Jumbo Tsuda turns pro, right? And he didn't even have debut match. He was directly sent to Amarillo, Texas to be trained under the Funks, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, he was Tommy Saruta out there.
yeah, Tommy Tsuruda.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you would think he'll be trained under Japanese dojo, right? Jan Baba had an idea. Instead, he sent Tsuruda directly to Amarillo, Texas, and he trained under the Funks, and he was already superstar upon his return in October of 1973. Yeah.
So in the spring of 75, we've got two events that are taking place, and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
and the inspiration of those tournaments and those tours actually came from JWA, right?
Yeah, World League. Ricky Dawson's idea between 1959 to actually all the way to 1972. Ricky Dawson won the first five tournament 59, 60, 59, 60, 61, 60. Yeah, 5 years in a row, then he suddenly died. But the World League tournament, every spring, every spring they had this big tournament, like a tradition. And Baba took it right away in 1973 and changed to Champion Carnival.
Hmm.
Champion Carnival was the idea that every single that the participant of the tournament had some kind of championship belt. Mark Lewin was South Hemisphere heavyweight title. Is there such thing?
Some
That
kind of title, yeah.
Yeah, King Curtis, Destroyer Dick Bayer was U.S. heavyweight title. Baba, Pacific Wrestling Federation champion.
Yeah.
And Pacific Wrestling Federation sounds pretty big, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everybody had some kind of championship. And
But
the
they had
75 tournament
I was just
we
going to
talk
say
about.
I was just
Yeah,
going to
go
say
ahead.
Ken Mantell was the junior heavyweight champion.
Junior, yeah, World Heavy, yeah, NWA World Junior Heavyweight title, yes, yeah, champion.
So they had both the big world titles from the NWA in the just coming over to participate in the
And Champion Carnival tournament the third year.
well, just in the Champions Carnival, they would generally
Well, they
have.
never had NWA champion there.
Oh, they never did.
They never did because in this kind of the tournament situation, you have to beat them.
All right.
Yeah, so NWA champion was never in
I see.
the champion carnival. First year, 1973, they came down to Giant Baba against Mark Lewin, final. The second year, Giant Baba against Mr. Wrestling, Tim Woods, and third year we're talking about Giant Baba against Gene Koniski. But it wasn't necessarily former world champions, really. Because you thought that the December of '74, Giant Baba beat Jack Briscoe,
Yeah.
for the first time to
Right.
become.
I was just wondering, did Baba think that was going to give him some kind of prestige in
Yes and no, because like we said that and wrestling in Japan is not under NWA umbrella necessarily. You know, Wrestling in Japan does not revolve around NWA.
right? So what was Baba's motivation for wanting that belt?
One 19 December of 1973, Inoki became world heavyweight champion in Tokyo on network television. World heavyweight champion meaning NWF world champion beating Johnny Powers.
Hmm.
Or reading oriented wrestling fans, like NWF world title from what? The Cleveland, Ohio?
Hmm.
Big deal, right?
Right.
But in network television, Anthony Inoki, with his New Japan Wrestling Company, with network television now, the finally bringing world champion from America, Johnny Powers, beating him. And Inoki's magic was, though, that NWF World Heavyweight title stayed in Japan the rest of the time.
Right.
Whereas Giant Baba will beat Jack Briscoe for a week, and following week on television, he defends NWA World title and Pacific Wrestling Federation PWF title together, beat Jack Briscoe twice, 2 weeks in a row. Good thing. But at the end of the tour, non-televised match, he drops the title back to Jack Briscoe. Only sports paper will have it.
Right.
Then on Baba's television, pretty soon you're supposed to forget about it because they never talked about Giant Baba's NWA titles, reign and dropping it.
I see. Yeah, they
You know what I'm
never.
saying?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. They used to do
More
that in.
smarter, more smart, like a more informed wrestling fan kind of realized you cannot win the NWA title. You can win it, but they secretly, quietly returns it at the end of the tour.
Right.
That's what Baba does. When I was a kid, it's incredibly, it's just incredible. But a lot of people thought Anthony Inoki's wrestling is real and Baba is show business.
Oh my gosh.
But that's how Inoki became much stronger, though. I mean, going in the mid 70s into late 70s. And Inoki was also a type of fighting champion that it was almost taboo in Rikidozan's era to have two Japanese going against each other, right? Two tops. But Inoki had a single match against strong Shozo Kobayashi, Kintaro Oki, or he even had Anto Inoki against Seiji Sakaguchi single match openly. It's like, wow, this is a ring where they really try to have number one wrestler in tournament. Whereas when Giant Baba brings in the top talent, the oh, Gene Kaniski, the Tim Woods, Von Erichs, the Bobo Brazil, all these top stuff from America, you're watching double count out. And then so you start scratching your heads. Yeah, this is it looks great on paper, but when you watch Giant Baba's All Japan Pro Wrestling, you always see DQ ending and double count out ending. Well, people get smarter. You know what I'm saying?
Right, right. Why was Mark on that first Champions Carnival in the final? Why? How
Mark
did?
Lewin?
Yes, how did Mark Lewin become such a big
It,
deal in Japan?
uh, Champion Carnival first year, 1973. Mark Lewin's very first tour. He was the kind of star you read on magazine. And never had tour with JWA. Mark Lewin finally came to Japan with his Anaconda sleeper.
Hmm.
Then he carried himself like superstar.
I see.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
Tim Woods the same way,
Yeah, he was another wrestler you read about,
right?
in magazine.
Former amateur champion,
Yeah, and also Mr. Wrestling with technique, like how much Japanese wrestling fan loves this technical wrestling of it.
right?
And masked wrestler, like Dick Bayo was in his prime time, huge heel, right? Put a foreign object in his mask and headbutts and all these things. But white mask, white tights, wrestling like a Mr. Wrestling. Oh my gosh, he must be good.
Yeah,
And he was in the tournament final. Also, tournament final of 1974, Baba against Mr. Wrestling, he unmasked after the match. I mean, like a gentleman.
yeah,
Lost the final, of the tournament. He was willingly take off his mask and reveal himself as former amateur champion Tim Woods. Like, don't you think?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Sure, yeah. That's awesome.
yeah,
So then, Kaniski, does he
yeah.
still
Third
have?
year, yeah,
Yeah, does he in '75? He's in the final with
yeah.
Giant Baba, and
He
is
was
he
the
still
kind of.
is he
It's
still a
hard to
big
understand, huh?
is he still a big deal from
Yeah,
his?
I think so. I think so. In 1970, see, 1969 and 1970, right? Dory Funk Jr., came twice as a champion.
Mm,
And first year, 69, Inoki challenge, 60 minute, and Baba challenge was, best of two out of three, one and 60 minute. And end of 1970, former champion Gene Kaniski came and beat Jan Baba for the international title and brought the belt back to America. And Baba had to fly to Los Angeles. Well, actually, Gene Kaniski never worked in Los Angeles, did he?
no,
Yeah, but it was for that television purpose. International champion Gene Kaniski defends his international title against former champion Jan Baba at the Olympic Auditorium. Title switch for television primetime special in Japan. So Baba treated Gene Kaniski as superstar till another few years.
yeah. So I got another question for you. Prior to the Champions Carnival in February, there's a tag team title switch in San Antonio.
Giant Baba and Jambutsura
Yeah,
beating
beating Terry and Dory Jr.
for the yeah
for the international tag team titles.
yeah.
Tell me what that was all about.
Giant Jambutsura's first title, yeah,
Yes.
and also Giant Baba, a very smart producer booker, right? That the new combination of Giant Baba and Jambutsura did not beat the Funks right away. They had to chase the title twice, three times, four times. Took them like three tours. And now that, like we said, televised match from San Antonio, Texas,
Right.
Baba and Jumbo have to go all the way back to, San Antonio, Texas, to challenge the Funks again. That the international tag team title, that hard to get to. They finally beat them in America and finally brought the tag team title back home, kind of thing.
And if you watch that match,
Yeah,
you see this American audience in San Antonio and these Texans getting booed and the Japanese getting cheered as
yeah.
the match goes. This is
Match
how
progress.
this is how the good of workers these four guys are. Is that they turn this audience that's a hometown audience for the Funks
Telling
into
the story.
yeah, the story goes and the audience actually pops when the Japanese wrestlers win the tag titles. It's a very interesting match if you're interested in psychology.
In the Texas, yeah.
Yes.
And made it historically official that in the rings, Sam Machinik comes in and raises both guys' hand.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and then televised in Japan.
Right.
Yeah.
And that they bring that match back and run it in Japan. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. For another decade.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So then this is the third Champions Carnival. What was Baba trying to achieve when he thought
This is the annual thing, and this was still not round robin. It was a bracket, like a tournament bracket, and final four: Baba, Kaniski, Dick Baya Destroyer, and Tim Woods. Final four. Those four did the round robin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it ended up being Giant Baba against Kaniski on top. Yeah.
And then over in New Japan, he's taking the World League name directly from JWA.
JWA,
right?
yeah.
And,
but the Americans they brought in was not good,
they were all NWF sort of wrestlers, right?
More like Coral Gotch guys and some of the Montreal wrestlers. And only NW affiliate helping Inoki at the time was Mike LaBelle from LA.
Now, to be honest with you, Killer Carl Krupp is one of my favorite heels of all time. I just love his presence. But I don't understand. Is he that big to be in the finals 2 years in a row in New Japan?
That was the name, like really Inoki really struggled that Baba got all the, every single superstar from America, and besides, Baba have Abdullah the Butcher and Inoki has Tiger Jeet Singh. Of course, it's like all year long, it's your program. But when you want to present World League or Champion Carnival, like a 6-week long tour, and have some big names stay in Japan, have a long tour,
right?
Really, Inoki really struggled to have any name superstars. Only guys Inoki could have is Carl Gotch himself and Carl Gotch's friends, maybe Pat Patterson and Johnny Powers. Pat Patterson and Inoki very good friends, from Oregon, 1965 too. They traveled together all year long, and Pat Patterson also helped Inoki hook up with Vince McMahon Sr., to have partnership, But Carol Krupp was when JWA folded, the very last tour was Iron Claw Series with Kintaro Oki and Fritz von Erich and Carol Krupp was the star of the tour, and Carol Krupp independent from everybody, right?
Yes.
And it was still politically okay to have, have all the Nazi sign and everything,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And,
I just loved his facials and the way he just looks dastardly. He just
not
looks,
even German, right?
No. I almost forgot though. Baba caps off the Champions Carnival after the final. He has a match with San Martino.
Yeah. And also during the tour, he brought in Dick the Bruiser too. Yeah, Dick. You see that Gene Kaniski And you had Mr. Wrestling on tour, had a Killer Kowalski on that tour. Dick Bruiser came in for 1 week. Bruno Sammartino came in for 1 week. All Giant Baba Generation superstars.
Now, remind me, Fumi, where was the final? Because the San Martino match after the Carnival tournament was in Tokyo.
Right.
Where did he have the final match? Was it in Osaka?
I will look into it.
It just occurred to me because I remember that they had the San Martino match at the hall at the university in Tokyo.
Nippon University, yeah.
Yeah.
Nichidai, yeah. Kowalski,
Kaniski, right?
yeah, Kaniski, yeah. Gene Kaniski. It was like last week in Wakayama. Yeah, Wakayama. Wakayama is the prefecture next to Osaka.
Yeah.
Still the big city and televised match. It's kind of like it's not in New York City, but you had this big tournament final in Pennsylvania or something.
Yeah, I figured it was near Osaka. If
Wakayama.
the final match was in Tokyo, it had to be. He was just so smart, to put these in the right towns. Yeah,
And also, like we said, that there was no studio match. That they were, televising all the important, tournament matches every week.
yes,
The
the tournament had to tell the story on television.
Yeah. But also Bruno Sammartino WWF and the PWF double title match has to be treated special.
Right.
Yeah, in Tokyo. Double count out again.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Everybody loses, nobody wins.
Yeah, so that was a frustration in the Baba's part, I mean, like Baba's fans, that we talked about it in my junior high, Well, they have all kinds of superstars, It's like Baba always double count out. I wonder, Inoki always give you result. Inoki
Right.
beat everybody.
Yeah, there's always a clean finish. What's Inoki thinking at this time with World League?
Killer Crop thing.
This
But
is this is the second World League.
second year, yeah.
Yeah.
But the focal point of World League, the second year, 1975, New Japan version of World League was the Antonio Inoki, Seiji Sakaguchi, Kintaro Oki, and Strong Kobayashi, the 4 Japanese star in one tournament, actually having round robin single match, more so than an American they had. Who did they have? That Mountain Mike and John Gagne, Fazar Singh, and Kiro Crop obviously was the number one name, though,
Right.
in the package. But Inoki, Kobayashi, Sakaguchi, and Kintaro Oki, they really, traded, win and lose, and ended up dropping out of the tournament. And Inoki and Kiro Crop being the final. And Inoki will give people the definite finish.
Yeah.
And also, you cannot have Tiger Jeet Singh in the tournament because you have to beat him.
Right. Yeah, and he had just put Tiger Jeet Singh over a few months earlier.
NWF title and another different storyline, yes.
Right, and a different storyline. He had lost the NWF title to Tiger Jeet Singh, so he's not going to be in the tournament.
And beating Inoki on television.
Yeah, that's for after the World League, right? Down the road.
And
one thing we didn't mention, but you mentioned his name. We talked about him a while ago, but Inoki gets Sakaguchi to come in from JWA, right?
Yeah. But
that's a big score.
Right, former world judo champion, and he was carrying dying JWA. But also TV Asahi, executive told Sakaguchi to join Inoki. And initially, JWA and New Japan was going to merge, but the rest of the JWA people said, then no. That was Inoki was fired because of it. Why join him? And then all the executive did not want to have anything to do with merging. not knowing they'll be losing television, you know.
Right, right.
But the Sakaguchi wanted to merge both companies, I mean, peacefully, and they promised Inoki this is what's happening as of April '73. And the TV Asahi wanted to switch affiliate from JWA to Inoki Sakaguchi version of New Japan. That's strong, you know.
Yes.
Then Sakaguchi just ended up having three guys: Sakaguchi and Ozawa, later on Killer Khan, Kengo Kimura, and Oshiro. Four guys moved, you know, then they joined. And 2 months later, JWA was, well, it was a sinking boat to begin with, but it really went down quick.
So, in the context of 1975, where we are in this promotional race,
Yeah.
Baba comes out strong. He's the star, and he's the one that gets the network television contract, and he hits the ground running. But is Inoki catching up here? I mean, is
Yeah, because you know, I believe that the reason that Giant Baba had a PWF title and NWF, you know, NWA World title beating Jack Briscoe, Inoki was claiming on the national television that he is the you know NWF World Champion, and general public look at Inoki as World Champion on television. Whereas, see, Baba is so careful about affiliate of, you know, NWA affiliate. So at the beginning, PWF, Pacific Wrestling Federation World Champion, right? But after he joined the NWA, he took this world part off, PWF Champion instead.
right,
I mean, like, to be politically correct, right?
right? Yes.
Inoki went ahead and said, "Well, I am world champion, NWF." Then general public, NWA, NWF, not that much difference.
Yeah, I was just going to say these two titles, the NWF title and the NWA title, they weren't significant, but these two guys made them significant in Japan.
In Japan, yeah, because you know Japan was still challenging to
Right.
the. You know, this is mid '70s, and
I don't
the
think most wrestling fans know that.
what
I don't think they know that the Japan.
significance of NWF?
Yes, I think they think that the Japan fans were like, "Oh, good, we get the NWA title or we get the NWF title." When actually it was the other way around. They didn't really understand or know what those titles were until Bob and Inoki brought them in and made them significant.
And also, if you watch wrestling, you know, this is like a really serious wrestling fan in Japan. You remember Luthez, Jin Kiniski coming, another world champion, Bruno Sammartino from different initials,
Right.
and
Right.
Inoki and Baba were together and challenging, you know, 28-year-old Dory Funk. Then Dory Funk, Terry Funk start coming to All Japan, and they're like affiliates, sending Jumbo Tsura over, and they're like a baby face American in Japan. Whereas Inoki always had all the Americans heel, you know. But the Inoki had his NWF title actually kept in Japan. You know, like, oh wow, you can actually win a world title from America and keep the title in Japan for another 8 years. You
Right.
know,
Right.
and but the reading oriented wrestling fan knew that Inoki's New Japan applied for NWA membership in '73 and '74, 2 years in a row, denied. It's like, wow, right? Then it finally joins NWA in '75. So Giant Baba and Anthony Inoki both become NWA member in '75. It was the advice from Vince McMahon Sr., Vincent James McMahon. He told New Japan, tell NWA board that it's antitrust, that it's
Right.
everything against free enterprise, that the NWA only recognize one company in one territory. That's against free enterprise.
Right.
Tell them that. So
Right.
it's like they had to give Inoki membership.
And they gave him membership, but they didn't give him a vote for the champion. Is that right?
Right, and also NWA champion never came to New Japan.
Right.
Never, never. Yeah, it's like Harley Race should come, right? Yeah.
But that was probably because the Funks were loyal to Baba, right?
And Funks, Race, Baba, they're all friends.
Yes.
You know, like real friends. Yeah.
Yes, close friends.
Yeah, close friend. But
So-
what's interesting is, though, a little bit later on, NWA Florida, Hiro Matsuda, and Grams, and Dusty Rhodes, they switch affiliates from Baba to Inoki.
In
Little bit
75?
later. 78, 79.
Some
Yeah.
later in the decade. Yeah.
Later in the decade. Yeah. But this NWA became almost like a traumatic that the primetime Inoki, never able to face NWA World Champion. It all ultimately became the formation of IWGP.
Right. International
Today's,
Wrestling Grand Prix.
yeah, to determine finally undisputed world championship of above all.
Right. This is
That was
just a,
Inoki's
to
idea.
me, it's just an interesting business case study between these two guys. I mean,
Yeah,
they are checkmating each other, right? They're playing chess.
checkmating, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're playing chess with each other with these two businesses in this nationwide. Both are nationwide promotions. They're both
Mm-hmm.
touring the whole country.
Mm-hmm.
Inoki gets television, which puts him on a equal footing
Map.
with
Yeah.
Baba, and it's just I'm fascinated by the moves that they're making here.
1976. We'll be talking about in another podcast, but the
Yes,
later year of 1975. But 1976 is important. Inoki pulled this big trick, Antonio Inoki against Muhammad Ali for real.
right, right. Yes,
Something John Baba would never try, right?
and even the wrestling, even though these are two very significant tournaments and tours, the wrestling actually gets better in '75, right? As we
And
go.
Inoki finally gets somebody like Billy Robinson.
Yeah.
He's huge in Japan. Huge.
Now, how did the fans in Japan react to Tiger Jeet Singh beating Inoki?
Um, it turned Tiger GC into like believable candidate. You know what I mean? That guy can beat Inoki in the ring. One, two, three.
Right.
You know, so he also gave NWF title credibility. He actually took the belt back to Toronto and he defended title and was just a film, you know, like a film short clip version of Tiger Singh defending his title in America and was aired in Japan. Oh, the title's gone. So this NWF title match picture become more interesting.
I mean, it seemed like to me that Tiger Jeet Singh was like he was like the Sheik that could wrestle longer matches.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, he was
But
kind of a
if you see both
wild.
guys, Tiger Singh, carbon copy of Sheik's mannerism, you know?
Yeah, but he wrestled longer matches. His matches were longer, and he actually wrestled. It wasn't just a brawl and with the foreign object or whatever. Although it was, he had some crazy bloody matches.
Yeah, and I don't know how they did it, but to me, when I was much younger than junior high and high school, it seemed like Inoki against Tiger Singh all year. You know? Yeah. Either lumberjack death match this time or oil wrestling this much or five referees. I was fooled
Yeah,
by it,
yeah, stiff
Five
on top
referee
stiff.
match.
Yeah.
Oh God, so many. At the end of the day, it was just another Inoki against Tiger Singh.
Well, Fumi,
But
you've been so generous with your time. Thank you so much.
okay,
I'm learning so much
to
from
the
you.
rest to the 75.
Yep.
Yeah.
That when next
Okay.
time when we come back, we will do the rest of 1975. I'm excited to hear how this story progresses. I'm learning, our listeners and viewers are watching and learning, and that's what we want to do here. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay.
All
Thank.
right, ladies and
All right.
gentlemen,
So long from Tokyo.
Fumi Saito, Japanese wrestling historian. Thanks, everybody. Well, we covered some ground today. Wow, we really did. Ed Don George. We covered his life with Dan Murphy, the author of the book on Ed Don George, which is available right now. Just go out and get it. I think you're going to enjoy it. If you liked our conversation around the legend, you'll enjoy the book that Dan has written and put together. And then the great Japanese historian Fumi Saito. I just love Fumi so much. I enjoy sitting and talking to him. We could have talked for hours, and we will coming up in future episodes as we work through the history of wrestling in Japan. And we get into the latter part of 1975. And then, of course, Fumi will be back for 76. All my guests will be moving forward with us through the time tunnel and through history. We got some great shows coming up. Wes Maidment, who's just a fabulous Canadian wrestling history fella. He's going to be here to talk about the history of wrestling in Ontario, Canada, which includes Toronto and Maple Leaf Gardens. And also, we're going to have Tim Dills back to talk about Tennessee. We'll have Bobby Simmons back to talk about Georgia. I've got Jerry Oates coming back to talk more Kansas City. And I'm working on a special guest, maybe, that we can get in here with Jerry. We'll see if it works out. We'll hold that for a surprise. But next week here on the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel, Personalities, Territories, Towns, and Buildings show, we're going to have the great George Shire, and we're going to talk about the history of the American Wrestling Association, how it was formed through the 60s and up to 1975. And we're going to talk about the year of 1975 when Vern Gagne, who formed the AWA and was its world heavyweight champion for all those years, is starting to relinquish the title. And he's setting up his successor for the AWA world title. And that happens in 1975. And George will be the man who takes us through all that. That's coming up in next week's show, the AWA 1975, here on Personalities, Territories, Towns, and Buildings. I'm your host, Tony Richards. Thank you for joining me here in the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. And I'll see you back here next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel podcast. Tune in for another great episode next week, interviewing wrestlers, referees, and media personalities that have made the sport of professional wrestling great. Be sure to follow us on Facebook at Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. We'll release a new episode soon. Don't you dare miss it.